So we're gonna sing this next song. It's just a pretty easy song, and it's just, like a prayer to God, and it's just say, Lord, I'm caught up in your presence, and we just want to be here at your feet, and we want nothing else but you. So this whole week, pretty much, I've just been kind of like in this space of like, Lord, you've given me everything I have. I want nothing else. I'm not here to ask for anything. I just want to be in your presence. We just want more of you. So it's a pretty easy song, so let's just sing that together. Say, I'm caught up in your presence. I just want to sit here at your feet. I'm caught up in this holy moment. I never want to leave. Sing, I'm not here for blessing. I'm not here for blessings. 'Cause Jesus, you don't owe me anything more than anything that you can do. I just want you. Let's sing, I'm caught up in your presence together one more time. Sing it out. I'm caught up in your presence. Yes, Lord. I just want to sit here at your feet. I'm caught up in this holy moment. I never want to leave. I never want to leave. Lord, I'm not here for blessing, God. I'm not here for blessings. Jesus, Jesus, you don't owe me anything more than anything that you can do. I just want you. And I'm sorry when I've just gone through the motions. I'm sorry when I just sung another song. Take me back to where we started. I open up my heart to you. Sing, I'm sorry, Lord, when I come with my own agenda. Sing it out. I'm sorry when I've come with my agenda. I'm sorry when I forgot that you're enough. Take me back to where we started. I open up my heart to you. Sing, I'm caught up in your presence. I'm caught up in your presence. I just want to be here, Lord. I just want to sit here at your feet. I'm caught up in this holy moment. I never want to leave, never want to leave. No, I'm not here for blessings, God. I'm not here for blessings. Jesus, Jesus, you don't owe me anything more than anything that you can do. I just want you. Ooh, sing, I just want you. Nothing else. Nothing else. Nothing else will do. I just want you. Nothing else. Nothing else. Nothing else will do. Let's sing it together. Sing, I just want you. Nothing else, Lord. Nothing else, nothing else. Somebody help me sing and say your love never fails, it never never runs out on me. Your love never fails, it never gives up, never runs out. Sing your love never fails, it never gives up, never runs out on me. Your love, and on and on and on and on it goes, for it overwhelms and satisfies my soul, and I'll never ever have to be afraid, 'cause one thing remains. So your love never fails, it never gives. Let's sing together. Never runs out on me. Sing your love never fails, it never gives up, never runs out on me. Sing your love never fails, it never gives up, never runs out on me. Your love, your love, your love.
Now Thomas, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands, and put my finger where the nails were, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." A week later his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here, see my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe." Thomas said to him, "My Lord and my God." Then Jesus told him, "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book. But these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. This is the word of the Lord.
Heavenly Father, these are holy moments set apart by you for incredible things, and often we don't even know they're happening. We don't even know we're in the middle of one, and yet they have so much power to change us. So Lord, we're expectant. We're hoping that right here, right now, that there are those of us that need another breath of life. There are those that need just a hint of the way forward. That there are those of us that need a little more hope. And here today, these minutes, but because of whatever it is that brought us here today, we will get that from you. I know that. In Jesus' name, amen. So, faith makes life better. Faith it makes life better. It's the way it is. This is you being here this morning, investing this hour and a bit of your time is improving your life. Maybe even more than exercising and working out every day. Maybe even more than eating nothing but your broccoli, your vegetables, or your keto or paleo, whatever it is. Faith makes life better. So just by doing this, you now have permission to lie on the couch and eat potato chips all week because you've already invested in this. And this is not just Pastor Guy telling you this. This is the research. This is the data. This is the scientific exploration of this. Here's one sample of this. This is from a study conducted by the Mayo Clinic, not a religious institution, that was published in Forbes, not a religious publication. But here's what they said. Most studies have shown that religious involvement and spirituality are associated with better health outcomes, including greater longevity, greater coping skills, and improved health-related quality of life, even during terminal illness, and less anxiety, less depression, and less suicide. Faith makes life better. Faith in a good God, it seems, makes for a good life. But now the question, what happens to faith when life isn't going well? When life takes a turn for the worse, what happens to faith? Is God still good when things go bad? A while ago, I read an article, and it struck me so deeply. This man's story impacted me so deeply. It just hung with me. It stuck with me. It was deep in me for days after. This guy named Richard Phillips, we have a picture of him up here. He grew up black in Detroit in the 40s and 50s. That was a tough time in a lot of ways, in a tough city for a young black guy. Not an easy way to start out for life, in life. But for him, it seemed that things started to turn a corner. He got a little older. He got a decent job. He met and married a girl he loved. They had a baby, a daughter, and then a son. And then all that was taken from him. One of his closest friends framed him for murder. And he spent 46 years in prison. He never saw his wife again. He lost all relationship with his kids. And there are all kinds of ways that life can take a bad turn. You've been going through many of them. I know some of you, I know your stories here. But Richard's, that's got to be one of the worst ways life can go bad. Now, after 46 years in prison, his conviction was overturned. He was set free. The real murderer confessed. And his sentence was the longest wrongful conviction sentence ever in the U.S. And when he got out a few years ago, he was 71 years old. Most of his life was now behind him. Most of his life had been spent in a prison cell unjustly. And at that point, when he got out of jail, he said he had no complaints. In fact, he came out, and in his first interviews, he talked about how grateful he was for the experience. Life turned bad because of an unfair injustice against him, and he says he can't complain. That would be the time to complain. I mean, especially in our culture, you go online, you see all the things that people lose their minds over. I mean, the smallest little thing makes people complain. And this guy, he lost 46 years, and not only will he not complain, he says he is grateful. How does that happen? What has to happen in a man, in his heart, in his perspective, for him to be like that? That when things go bad, we ask, God, now what? We ask, is God still good? Can I still trust him? And I think these are the questions. These are the very questions that Thomas helps us answer. His story speaks to us here. His story is an old one. It is long before the internet. It is long before the scientific method, and we have the empirical data to test these things. And yet, his story, it speaks to us. Our time, our culture, our lives, our struggles, all the ways that life can take a difficult turn. And now science, it makes the assertion that this is not just the Bible, not just me, the preacher. Science is making the assertion that faith makes life better. But what happens to faith when life takes a wrong turn? And here now it's my assertion that living by faith is not the only option. There are other ways to live. But faith is the only way to live a full life as God intended. Faith makes life better, and it is the only way to live a full life the way God intended you to live. See, at this point in the Gospel of John, chapter 20, this is on the heels of the Easter story. I talked about the first parts of chapter 20 a couple weeks ago. And 2 times Jesus has shown up already on Easter Sunday. 2 times he showed up first to Mary and then to the disciples. And each time, the Jesus that died on Friday and then is alive on Sunday, he shows up to these people alive, and it radically transforms their response to life. They see Jesus and then they live totally differently. We talked about that parts 1 and 2 here. But when they see him this time, it is now a week later. It is the Sunday after the first Easter. And it is like the whole chapter. And not just this chapter, chapter 20, but it's like the whole Gospel of John is building momentum, is building anticipation and expectation towards this very moment, this appearance here when Jesus appears for Thomas. And in a way, he shows up for Thomas, but he also shows up for you, for us. This is our gift. See, when Jesus had showed up on the first Easter Sunday, the resurrected Jesus showed up. Thomas was not there. Thomas missed the whole thing. He was in the drive-thru picking up coffee and donuts, and by the time he got back, he was held up. He's like, my tap didn't work. And they're like, Jesus was here, and he cannot believe it. He can't believe that it's true. The disciples, they're just totally energized by everything they've seen. They're excited. They've seen their dead friend now alive. And for them, it means that life, existence, creation, the entire universe as we know it, everything is different because Jesus is alive. Jesus has defeated death, and that means that anyone who follows him will not die. But for Thomas, he shows up, and for him, he hears this, and it is just too good to be true. See, Thomas would like to believe. He wishes he could. Even back then, even before all the research, Thomas knows faith makes life better. But he can't. And likely, we all know people who do not believe. And often, I believe that those people have good reasons to not believe. See, I think for most people, at first, it's not just the intellectual challenges. It's not just about the veracity of the miracles in the Bible, everything Jesus performed, or it's not about the explanation of the origins of the universe. It doesn't start there, even if it sometimes goes there. With Thomas, and I think often with us, or the people we know, the people that we meet along the way, our doubt begins with an experience. Something we have to live through when life takes a wrong turn. It's not how we reason with things that gives us the reasons to doubt. Often, it's what we've had to go through when things don't go well. And so for so many of us, when things go bad, God's goodness can no longer be trusted. And I think that's fair. And I think that's what's happening with Thomas here. See, when Thomas shows up in this chapter, when he shows up to the disciples in the upper room again, John writes down and gives us a one-sentence summary of Thomas's whole life up to this point. He's reminding us of what defined Thomas's life and how it had all been made better because of Jesus, because of faith in Jesus there. Verse 24, it says, "Now Thomas, also known as Didymus, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came." Thomas called Didymus. See, John doesn't have to include both of those names, but he does, because it just tells us Thomas's whole backstory here. Thomas is his Aramaic name, or kind of like his Jewish name. And Didymus is the Greek form of his name, but they both mean the very same thing. They both mean the twin. And you see, just that Thomas gets included in the story as one of Jesus' disciples, it says so much about how faith in Jesus has made life better for Thomas. You see, these days, when someone has twins, it is considered a blessing. It's a good thing. It's a fun thing. It is the gift so nice, God gives it twice. Daryl, wave your hand for me back there again. Daryl working the sound today. He is a twin, and if his brother Dean was here with him, you might not even be able to tell them apart. It's not. You just have both of them around, and it's great. But back then, in these times, in these days, in this part of the world, it was the exact opposite. Back then, it was common for the mother or the child, or maybe even the mother and the child, that both could die in childbirth. Having a baby, then as today, is supposed to make life better. But back then, it also came with a high risk levels. It was very dangerous. It could turn deadly quickly. And to have twins doubled the risk of something going wrong. And if you did have both babies, if everybody did live, often times were tough. It was one more mouth to feed. It was one more unexpected kid to clothe. And so rather than a blessing, twins back then, they were considered more of a curse. Twins make life worse. They put you at increased risk. They were a drain on your resources. And so often what would happen is that the second child born, the twin, didn't even get a name. The firstborn, that was the child you wanted and you hoped for. They got a name. And the second kid, well, that was just the twin, Thomas, no name. This is in a culture, this is a part of the world where names are so important. Your name is your identity. Your name speaks of your destiny, who you are believed to be here in the planet. See, Jesus' name, Jesus means the Lord is our salvation. mean, his name is just who he is. Jesus is our salvation. The Lord is Jesus. Jesus is salvation. And then Jesus, he takes this disciple named Simon, and he says, Simon, from now on, you're going to be called Peter. Jesus, by changing his name, is changing the trajectory of Simon into Peter's life. Peter means the rock. The rock solid one, the one that the Church of Jesus Christ, Peter will be part of the foundation of that church. He's that guy. That's who he will become. Now, Thomas, the twin, he just doesn't even get a real name. So for that kid, that's his identity. The leftover, the nobody. That's his destiny. No name. It's like Pete and repeat. Or Kate and duplicate. This is a good time for a dad joke. Pete and repeat are sitting in a boat, and Pete falls out. Who's left? I didn't think it was that hard. Pete and repeat are sitting in a boat, and Pete falls out. Who's left? Okay, I'll say it again. Pete and repeat are sitting in a boat, and Pete falls out. Who's left? Yeah, all right, you got it. So Thomas's identity, just in his name, is to be a nobody. That is the destiny. That's the way life will take him. And then one day Jesus calls him. Jesus chooses him. Jesus picks him out from the crowd. He is now special. He's noticed. Maybe for the first time in his whole life, he's not just the leftovers anymore. He's not just the unwanted accident. Now he's got purpose. He's got calling. And things are so good now. Things are better than he could have ever imagined as just the twin, as just Thomas. Life has turned good for him. Faith has made life better until Good Friday. And then on Good Friday, everything is taken from him. Things turned very bad. Everything he had hoped his life might now become, it's all gone. Hope for a better future, gone. Hope for a renewed destiny, a better path in life, taken. Back to just being the twin, Thomas, Didymus. Now, we experience the same kinds of things even when we're following Jesus, just like Thomas. Even when we're following Jesus, life can take a wrong turn. And see, whether you follow Jesus or not in life, pain will find you. You will encounter trouble. Life takes wrong turns. It just does. And when it does, we just can't help but ask, is God still good when things go bad? Some of us, in these tough moments, in the dark moments, in the disappointments, often we just doubt if there's a God at all. And others, maybe we don't doubt that there's a God, we just doubt the nature of this God, that maybe he's no longer a good God in your eyes. See, faith is supposed to make life better, but when things go wrong, we ask, God, how could you do this? God, if you were loving, God, if you were good, God, if you were powerful, why would you let this happen? All kinds of wrong turns in life. Anything can happen that makes us ask those kinds of questions. The loss of a child. Broken relationship with a child, the early loss of a parent, maybe it's a job or a business or a degree program, something that just won't work out, something we had invested so heavily in, and then we lose it all. It's problems at school. It's a sickness, some kind of prolonged struggle, whether it's our physical health or our mental health, emotional health, could be anything. A relationship just falls apart. A dream dies. Is God still good when things go bad? Because sometimes it's not just one thing, it's just the way they stack up. There's one expert, he calls these stackable losses. And it's kind of like death by paper cuts. One you can live with. Two, you can bear up under it. But then they just keep coming and coming, and there is no relief. And you wonder, is God still good when things go bad? And I think in all those moments, for so many of us, we're tempted to feel and ask, God, I guess you're just not who I thought you were. I'm sure that's what Thomas thought about Jesus on Good Friday. And the implication of that is, God, if you're not who I thought you were, then maybe I'm not who I hoped I could be. And I think that's the space where doubts settle in. See, here, this is the part in the story where Thomas does get a name that we probably all know him by. Doubting Thomas. I'm not sure it's fair. I mean, who doesn't doubt at least a little bit when everything goes wrong? Doubts serve a powerful purpose. They're there to protect us. We put up our doubts kind of like a wall, like a brick wall around our heart to protect us from more pain getting in. It would to protect us from more disappointments, to protect us from being let down again, from putting ourselves too wholeheartedly into something. See, we'd say, God, I thought if I put my faith in you, that would make life better, that things would then go well for me. But instead, putting my faith in you is what set me up for the disappointment. That's Thomas's story. It was following Jesus that set him up for the loss. And we go through this and we say, I won't let that happen again. I was caught off guard once, but not again. This time the wall goes up. Faith didn't make life better. Faith is making the pain worse. And so my only protection is my doubt. I think that's fair. So we just say, God, I won't trust you. Either you're God, you're not there at all, there is no God, or God, you just don't seem to care about me. And if you won't, then I have to. So here's another question. When that happens, when the fires of faith grow dim, is it possible to breathe new life into them? Is it possible that faith could still grow big enough to push you forward, to push you out, to make your life better? Is it possible that your doubts and your fears and your disappointments don't have to contain you, but they become the very point, like it is with Thomas, like it is for Richard Phillips? You'll see that our faith can even grow, that our faith could even inspire others to also have faith, that their life could be better. And if it's possible, how? How does that happen? And see, here in the story, this is where Thomas's journey, it takes a significant turn. And this is where Thomas, he teaches us at least 3 faith steps forward, 3 steps for finding God's goodness, for faith making life better, even when things go bad. And the first one is just this piece. It's just this single word that Thomas says, unless. Thomas hears from all the other disciples that Jesus is alive. He's defeated death. And Thomas objects. He says, unless I see the wounds, unless I put my hand in them, I can't believe. I won't believe. I can't. Here in this context, unless, that single word, it just names something so powerful. It names the gap between what our faith hopes for and what our doubts fear. It's the gap between those things. There's the life that Thomas hoped he could live, and the future he's afraid he's stuck with if his doubts are correct. And it hinges on one thing for him, unless he sees and touches the wounds of Jesus. And see, probably when things go bad for you, when things go bad for us, we probably do very similar things. For us, there's a gap between settling permanently in our doubts or choosing to move forward in our faith. And that word unless names what the gap is between the two. So what is it for you? What do you think you would need to see or hear or know or experience? What would need to be resolved in your life? Is there something you need to get? Is there some achievement that you need to realize? Something that would increase your trust in God's goodness when things go bad. See, faith moves us forward. See, whatever you put your faith in, that is what allows you to take a step, to take a risk, to move out. Doubt does the opposite. Doubt wants to protect you by holding you back, by making things as safe as possible to prevent you from risk. But that also keeps you from progress. If there's no risk, there's no reward. And the danger is that staying still, staying behind the brick wall our doubts build, can be just as deadly as trying to move. Living from doubt does not protect you. And refusing to move forward, it can also kill you. See, in 1910, There's a factory in Boston, the city of Boston. In that factory, a vat full of molasses exploded, and molasses started running out into the streets of Boston. It oozed out into the streets, and it killed 21 people. I know you're not sure whether you should laugh at that, but the very substance that we use to define slowness, slow as molasses, somehow managed to creep up on 21 people and kill them. I mean, what is going on? How slow are these people moving? Everyone walk for your life. It's okay, you can laugh. I don't even know those people. It's a long time ago. But defining your life by doubt can do this to you. It can have that effect. Not putting our faith into something can keep us from the benefits that faith offers. It will hold you captive in your pain. It will keep you stuck in your disappointment. See, the truth of faith in Jesus is that he never promised us an easy life. He never promised us that every dream would come true. He never promised us to resolve every problem in our lives, that everything would work out. In fact, he just promised the opposite. He says, in this world you will have trouble. The night before he dies, this is what he's telling them. But more than that, he promises, no matter your troubles, I will be there with you. It's in our troubles that we meet him as he is, as Thomas meets him, as the wounded Savior. It is when we are broken that we meet him as a healer. It's when we are totally depleted, nothing left, that we meet him as a restorer. See, in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus' most famous sermon, he makes this promise. He says, blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are you when you're spiritually bankrupt, when you got nothing left in the tank. When you have nothing and you've lost everything, then yours is the entirety of the kingdom of heaven. All my riches are yours. And he says, blessed are those who mourn. You who mourn, you will be comforted. When you lose what matters, that's when you can gain what matters most. Then you can have a share in all the riches of all creation. Then you can be comforted by the God of the universe personally and intimately. But first, before you get the benefits of faith, first you have to experience that total emptiness, spiritual bankruptcy. The worst kind of pain, the worst kind of disappointment. You have to go through all kinds of great loss. And it's then, by moving forward in faith, it's then that you get to meet God as he is, not as we wished he would be, not as the God who just solves all our problems with the snap of his fingers. That's the first step, unless, to discovering God's goodness when things turn bad. So rather than pulling away from God, our doubts, our fears, there's a great opportunity there. And like Thomas, it helps to take a step and name it, unless. And it starts as a statement of doubt, a self-protection. But then the amazing thing happens is that he meets God in Christ right at the point of his doubt and his fears and his disappointments. He meets him there and he touches the wounds. And so what is your unless? What is the condition that is holding you back, holding back your faith? Either faith will move you forward or your doubts, like molasses, will trap you. And if your goal is just safety, doubt may not be any safer than faith. This is the risk each of us has to take. See, faith is not knowledge. It is trust. See, knowledge works like hindsight. You get to look back behind you, and you can see, you can know what was true and what was false, what was wrong and what was right. But life is lived forward, not looking backward. And we would like to know everything before we commit to anything. We desperately would like to know in advance, is he or she the right person to marry? Is this the right job to take? Is this the right place to go? Will I be hurt? Will I lose? And we would like to be able to protect ourselves from all that kind of pain. We want to know if something is a sure thing. We want to know if it's the right house to buy or the right car to buy or the right job to take, because we're afraid we'll lose out if we make a mistake. And faith just doesn't work like that. Faith looks forward into the unknown. It is believing that there is another step to take, even when you can't see it. That you can put your foot out and there will be solid ground to catch you. So for you, at what point of your disappointment, could you invite God in? What does one faith step forward look like for you? Where can you exercise some trust? What is the unless? See, if you never dig deep enough to name it, then you may miss the opportunity to meet God there. Thomas does it. And if you don't, you may never find out the way Thomas does if maybe he's actually listening to you. Thomas says, unless I see and touch his wounds, I can't believe it. And Jesus answers that prayer. Thomas asks to see the evidence of God's love for him. That's where we will find his goodness. Thomas wants to see and touch the wounds. Is God still good when things go bad? And the evidence is in his scars. They're the evidence of God's never-ending, overwhelming, relentless, tireless love and goodness toward you. See, we would like to know everything before we commit to anything. And before you even took a breath, Jesus committed himself fully to you on the cross because of his love and his goodness toward you. Is God still good when things go bad? Or will God be good to me when I do bad? And the evidence is in his wounds. See, faith makes life better. But in times of doubt, in times of disappointment, you have to take a step of faith forward to just find out, to test it. And so what is your unless? What is it for you? Maybe God will meet you right there. That's the first piece, unless. And the second one is this. The second one is to adopt a long view. See, in our times of pain and disappointment, how we see God in those moments will determine how we respond to him in those moments. And in this chapter, 13 different times, when you read through that chapter all at once, John 20, there's 13 times that the disciples see him and then they respond to him in one way or another. And how we see God in our difficult times will determine how we respond to him. That if we see God as trustworthy, even when times are tough, if we see him as worthy of our faith, we'll be more likely to take a step forward trusting him, even when it's hard, even when there's pain. See, pain gets our attention. Pain will narrow our focus on just the present moment. When I have a sliver in my foot, even though it is very tiny, it's all I can think of. Even though it's harmless, I can't focus on anything else until I get that thing out. But to see God's goodness in our times of difficulty, when we're hurt, when we're feeling pain, it often means we just have to choose intentionally to adopt a longer view on things. It means you might have to let that sliver sit there for a while. So back to Richard Phillips. After 46 years of injustice spent sitting in a prison cell, he left prison with no bitterness and with only gratitude. And now he's in his 70s. Most of his life is well behind him. But how does he come out so grateful? See, he took a long view on his life and he said this: "It's a very good possibility that I could have been dead coming up in Detroit. This," he's talking about his life in prison, he says, "this is the pattern of life that has led me to this point. Can't complain because I'm 73 years old and 95% of all the guys I knew are dead." And he goes on to talk about the guys he knew that died of AIDS, died of violence, died of suicide, died of poor health or overdose. They're all gone. And God used a 46-year prison sentence to keep him alive for this season of life. And God used those years in between, the years in a cell, to keep working on his heart. See, after almost 20 years in prison, Richard Phillips started to paint. And he discovered a gift and a passion for painting. And over the next 25, 26, 27 years, he created over 400 of these paintings. And now he sells them for thousands of dollars. And he travels to churches like ours to share his story, to share what God did to him, did in his heart while he sat in his cell. He's sharing his story. He is creating a legacy that will outlive him, like Thomas. But he had to take a long view on his life to be open to seeing things that way. And that takes a faith that there's more to your life than you can see in just this moment. There are other things going on, other things coming that you just don't have perspective for yet. You just have to look ahead. And I know that sometimes the slivers in our feet, they can feel like a stake through the heart. But for faith to make life better, you have to take a longer view on things. There's more to your life than you can see right now, and that if you lift your head, he will meet you in your pain. Adopt a long view. And now there's just this last piece and we're done. And it's this word, into. See, faith makes life better, but it depends on what you put your faith into. And now here, when you read the Gospel of John or you read the other letters written by John in the New Testament, you see that John writes about faith a little differently, a little more nuanced than most of the other New Testament writers. And you don't see it as often in your English Bibles because the translations, they make them as smooth to read as possible. But John's writing is almost awkward because he always writes about faith, not just as a noun, but as a verb. Something you do, not just have faith, but to faith, to believe, to trust. And he always follows it up with a preposition, into. Verb, believe, then preposition, into. Put your faith into something. Do faith into, or more specifically, into someone. And see, what have you put your faith into? What are you counting on to make your life better? What exercise plan? What diet plan? What growth strategy? What business plan? Our faith is not first in a Bible. Our faith is not first in a creed or a set of statements or a religion or a certain style of worship. Our faith is in the person of Jesus Christ, the person who defeated death to give us life, the person who is the way, the truth, and the life. And if you want to move forward in life, if you want the kind of life that is made better by faith and make it the best you can be, then your faith belongs into the person of Jesus. And it's kind of like this. There was this French daredevil, Blondin, and we have a picture of him. He was famous for doing these stunts where he'd go across Niagara Falls on a high wire. 1,100 feet across, 160 feet high up in the air. And one time while he's doing this stunt, crossing the high wire, royalty was there watching. The Duke of Newcastle was there. And so Blondin, he wanted to put on a great show. And so first he pushed across an empty wheelbarrow. And when he got to the other side, he threw a sack of potatoes in, and he pushed that across, and everybody's amazed, and they applauded for him. And then he stopped in front of the Duke of Newcastle, and he asked royalty, he said, "Do you believe that I could push a man across the falls in this wheelbarrow?" And the Duke said, "Of course." Actually, he's English, so he said, "Of course." He's new royalty. And then Blondin asked in front of the whole crowd, everybody watching, everybody listening, he said, "Then will you get in?" And the Duke said, "Not a chance." And so Blondin put the offer out in front of the entire crowd, everybody that was there watching. He said, "Who will trust me to get them across the falls in this wheelbarrow?" And only one person accepted. Only one older lady stepped out from the crowd and climbed into the wheelbarrow. And only one person was willing to take the risk and experience all of the exhilaration, all the hope, all the wonder, all the fear, all the joy of that journey across the falls. And that old lady was Blondin's mother. She was the only one that got to know it. And this is the experience Jesus is calling us to put our whole lives firmly into his hands. No backup plan. That is there that we will find all the wonder, all the hope, all the sense of purpose, all the joy and real peace he wants us to have. That faith is not just a set of beliefs. not just a set of beliefs in what is right or wrong or true or false. Faith is this active verb of putting our trust fully into Jesus, your whole life into him, into his life. One step at a time, he will get you across. You will make it. The life of faith is not without risk. Faith will make your life better, but inevitably you will experience all kinds of moments along the way where you will question God's goodness, and it's just part of the journey. Wondering, will he get me across? Will I fall? But taking that risk is also the place of great reward. And it's those moments that if your faith is into Jesus, that you will find the life, you will find the better life. In fact, the very best life, the life you were designed to live, that you long for, there you find it. This is what Thomas found. See, Thomas, the no-name disciple, he was the one that took the gospel into India. The church in India finds its roots, its history back in Thomas coming to preach the gospel there. And eventually, Thomas would be martyred for that. That is how his story ended. See, Thomas is not a guy full of doubt who refused to take a risk for fear of being hurt again. Thomas is someone whose faith is on fire, who pushed him out, ready to move forward, no matter the cost, even the cost of his own life, because he trusts that God is still good, even when things go bad. And now, today, 2,000 years later, you probably know someone named Thomas. Because of the way that Thomas put his faith wholeheartedly into Jesus, we name our kids after the guy with no name. That is what a good God can do in a life, even when things go bad. See, Jesus showed up for Thomas, but the story is written for you. That's why Jesus says to him in verse 29, "Have you believed because you've seen me? Blessed are the people who have not seen and yet have believed." This is for you. This is you. This is your life of faith. And so the question is, now what? I can't see clearly all the time, but I can put my faith into Jesus and trust there is a way forward no matter what. And so what do we do when life takes a wrong turn? Even then, we put our faith wholeheartedly into Jesus. We trust that even when things go bad, God is still good, that we can take the long view. You will make it. You will make the way across. He will get you across that divide. You will not fall. His love will carry you. The evidence is in his wounds. Beaten, scarred. He died for you. Amen.